George Washington. Buzzle, a naughty boy, and George were fighting in a beautiful school built of logs. "Stop it right now!" Their teacher rushed and shouted. "Why are you fighting?" The two boys and other children around them were speechless. "I picked the fight first. Punish me," said George. The teacher knew that Buzzle had picked on other children, so George confronted him. But George said it was his fault. This boy is George Washington, the first President of the United States. The United States was established by the people who immigrated from England and Europe and settled in America where Indians had already been living. George was born in February 1732. He was wise and brave from when he was a child. One day, his father, who had taught George a lot of things, died suddenly. So his mother had George educated to bring him up as a great man. George was an excellent student and grew up as a well-behaved boy. When George was 16 years old, he worked as a surveying engineer for Mr. Fairfax. He enjoyed his work because he had wanted to do it. But the work of surveying was very dangerous. George worked very hard going around mountains. One day, when an Indian girl fell into a river and was carried down by the stream, George ran into the river and rescued her. He risked his life by doing so. Then everyone praised his courage. When he was a young man, George worked as a volunteer army major. The United States was under the control of the French and British military. But the French and British military weren't on friendly terms with each other. "I'm afraid there may be a war." People were always uneasy and anxious. A British military officer decided to send a message to the French military to say a war should not break out. But no one would voluntarily carry it to the French military. "I will go." George thought someone should do it, although it might risk his life. George got over a lot of difficulties to carry the message to the French military. But the French military didn't accept the suggestion of the British military. Despite the snowstorm of the winter, George returned to the British military camp with a reply from the French military. He explained details of the French military, such as its strength and weapons. At last, the feared war broke out. The French military joined forces with American Indians and started the war. The British lost the war, although it received assistance from its mainland, the United Kingdom, in fighting the enemy. "We cannot hand over Virginia to France. Let's defend it." The people of Virginia had Washington as their commander and fought against France. Washington led his army and fought away the French military. Now peace seemed to have come to the United States. But this time, the British military behaved high-handedly toward them. The British military imposed heavy taxes on goods to collect various taxes from the Americans. They were impatient, and representatives from all states gathered for a meeting. Washington also attended the meeting. The United States sent a letter to the United Kingdom and requested it to stop its high-handedness towards Americans. While waiting for a reply from the United Kingdom, they were nervous. If things went wrong, a war might break out. At last, the U.S. people fought the British military under the command of General Washington in order to gain independence. Many Americans threw away their shovels and hoes, but picked up their weapons to participate in the war. Washington taught them how to use guns and waited for the proper time. One day, Washington went to Sergeant Jack, who were standing guard, and delivered him a letter from his hometown. I will stand guard in place of you. Read this letter and write a reply to your parents." As you can see, Washington's love for his soldiers was remarkable. When the cold winter was over and the spring came, Washington immediately launched an attack. The war lasted for 8 years, and the British military finally surrendered to the United States. After the war, the United States selected Washington as its